From Amerivet Securities, a service-disabled, veteran-owned broker-dealer in New York City, we bring you Compass Check, a podcast created by veterans for veterans. The military uses a compass to navigate air, land, and sea. Now, Compass Check is here to help you navigate your transition into the corporate workforce. Our goal is to reach military veterans and members of the veteran community, empower and connect them with a multitude of resources that will ultimately set them up for success after leaving the military. I'm your host, Army veteran James Fitzgerald. Let's get moving. The Modern Military Association of America, also called MMAA for short, was formed through the merger of the Servicemembers Legal Defense Network, the American Military Partner Association, OutServe, and the Military Partners and Families Coalition. The Modern Military Association of America is the nation's largest organization of LGBTQ service members, military spouses, veterans, their families, and allies. MMAA is a non-partisan 501c3 nonprofit organization working to make a difference in the lives of the modern military family through education, advocacy, and support. MMAA provides pro bono legal services for the LGBTQ and HIV positive military and veteran communities. This cost-free legal help assists individuals directly with discharge upgrades, legal name changes, and discrimination complaints. With numerous local chapter network locations available, MMAA facilitates opportunities for fellowship, camaraderie, and leadership development for individuals and families located across the country and around the world. My guest today is MMAA Chief Executive Officer Jennifer Dane. Here's our conversation. Welcome. It is another day and another leg of our journey transitioning out of the military and into the corporate workforce. I'm excited to have Jennifer Dane joining me for this leg of our journey. Jennifer, welcome. Please introduce yourself because it's going to be an exciting day, and I want to go ahead and jump right into things to let people know who it is that you are and the organization that you're leading.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Jennifer Dane. I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran and also the CEO and Executive Director of the Modern Military Association of America, which we are the nation's largest LGBTQ plus military and veteran nonprofit.
One of the things that I don't think the general public and even some of the veteran military community truly understands is the sheer number of LGBTQ plus service members and veterans that we currently have in the United States. 1 million plus, easy. So today's discussion is going to, it's quite an endeavor, but we're going to try to cover as much of that 1 million as we can and shine a little bit more of a light on the pathway out of the military, not just for that LGBTQ veteran or service member, but also their families. So we're going to put a little bit more light and shine on that journey, and I'm glad to have you with me to illuminate that. So jumping into Modern Military Association of America, what I'd like to do is get into the programming. There's a myriad of different services and programs that you're providing, not just to transitioning service members, but also to their families, veterans. Please give me an idea, like start with the legal services, as I feel that that is one of the most vital and under-discussed resources that transitioning service members and veterans alike need in order to successfully transition out.
Absolutely. So there's two major legal services that we provide pro bono, and one of them is upgrading discharge records. So we know that our organization was founded in 1993 because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And for
Mm,
folks that don't know that, Don't Ask, Don't Tell barred service members who were lesbian, gay, or bisexual from serving, and subsequently it discharged them and put either um, dishonorable or other than honorable, or stamped it with homosexual conduct. So we know that there's about 114,000 folks that still have not got their discharge upgraded, even though 2011 was the date that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. So we provide those steps, assisting folks in finding those resources, connecting them with our law partners, and upgrading those so that they can receive the services um, through the VA or the home loan or going back to school, or really even federal hiring or state hiring. So we make sure that the pathway is corrected for them, just for being themselves. The second service that we provide is name changes for transgender veterans and also dependents, for that matter. And we make sure that we have the records corrected to really showcase who the veteran is and who the dependent is of that, if they're still serving, um, just so that their records can reflect exactly who they are as individuals, and they can showcase their time in service, um, who they are today versus who they were maybe if they were serving under a different name. But we do those two legal services right now.
one of the things that is so important is how you're called, what name people attach to you when they address you and when you present yourself to others. That is an important piece of who we are, our identity. So those legal services create a bridge and a gateway into a place that makes us feel like we're seen, we're being heard, and our well-being is being put to the forefront. So those legal services are vital, just as vital as some of the services that you're providing for service members and veterans that are HIV positive. I'd like for you to touch on that if you can.
So one of the things we also did is our organization was the organizational plaintiff on a lawsuit challenging the HIV. I'm sorry, my dogs are here, so this is a real time office. Uh, Coworkers are kind of loud sometimes, but our lawsuit was a challenge the DoD and DHS for folks who were living with HIV and if they could be able to serve and commission. So we are 100% in our lawsuits challenges. So we did win that. However, that doesn't mean that changes everything. There's still a lot more challenges that need to be done. But
Wow.
for folks living with HIV, we make sure that we have a pulse on that. Those individuals are not always in the LGBTQ community, um, and
Absolutely.
there's a lot of progress that's been made. Folks usually or folks can carry a serostatus load, and they can serve just as capably as anyone else in the military. So we've challenged. We're currently challenging to make sure that folks living with HIV can enlist and can commission, and there are resources such as PrEP that can be given to them um, without having commander's approval, or there's other areas to access. But we have within our community, we have specialized group that we can connect folks with if they are living with HIV. We make sure that's really protected because that is something that's very personal to individuals. But any issue that comes up, I mean, currently I'm working on some legislation with some Congress folks to create like a test trial run for PrEP and making sure that's more
Mm,
accessible for folks in the service. And then moving on to the VA, making sure that we have, as much accessibility or more after service, and we're meeting all the needs of folks because whenever you have a diagnosis of HIV, it's not life ending. You can still live a life that's like
right.
everyone else. It's not like the 90s. Um, like there should be no stigma attached to it.
I'm a child of the 80s, and I definitely remember G.I. Joe being my number one cartoon show in existence. And at the end, there would always be this educational segment, and they would kind of button it all up by saying knowing is half the battle. And I feel that that very struggle was rampant throughout the 80s and 90s when it came to misinformation about HIV and AIDS, and just exacerbated the issues that were already killing so many of the LGBTQ community, but also, as you mentioned earlier, some that are not a part of the community still were affected by those stigma, by those stereotypes that were ultimately wielded against them and left them isolated. So those are the things that we have to take into account when looking at our present day support. Is, are we still under the same misconceptions and using the same misinformation that got us into some of these issues that we're currently contending with now, to include some of the information that parents, need to have that maybe they currently don't, about LGBTQ youth, and some of the approaches that they can take to help them find their identity and understand better how to be a better parent in this family unit. But Milk Pride is something that you've established to help support families with LGBTQ youth. And I'd love for you to discuss a little bit about that very program.
Yeah, Meal Pride is really near and dear to my heart. It was started by two of our members because they had children that identified as LGBTQ. They themselves were not, but their children did. And we know today that there's over 85,000 estimated military-connected children that
Mm.
identify as LGBTQ. So this is a huge portion of our military families that we've really never talked about. We've never really had these groups on bases that I know of. Um, but one thing that we did see, unfortunately, this year was, I think there was about 266 bills that were introduced into either state legislation across the country that
Mm.
harmed LGBTQ youth. One specifically was in Texas for specifically targeting transgender youth, and another one in Florida. So what our organization has done is we made sure to take a stand for those folks, and we, talked to the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense and said, "What are you going to do to protect our families?" We had some really great response from the Air Force, and they laid out, the program of what they would do if you are there and how they could support
Mm.
you. And we're hoping that other services do that. Um, and we also worked with PFLAG, which is parents of LGBTQ children, and they created a guidebook it's called At Ease, and it's in English and Spanish, just
Mm.
talking about some of the resources. We're in the process of starting groups with them, like discussion groups with them, so that we can have some virtual spaces for families, because there's a lot of questions. And we know if you're currently serving, your child can enroll under the Exceptional Family Member Program or EFMP, but there's no standardization. And so it leaves a lot of families just having more questions and not knowing. And I'm thankful to say that we just hired our first Mill Pride director for this
Oh,
program.
awesome.
We're doubling down on our effort because we're making sure that families know where to go, camps that are friendly, and anything else that they need, and just providing some resources, because as we're seeing, there's more and more children that are coming out identified as LGBTQ. And that's not to say that, we're having more gay kids. It's just to say that, because I think that's one of the biggest arguments, but it's just saying that there's more exposure, there's more media around it, there's more self reflection and acceptance. And we know that there is a gap in knowledge. And I think it was the Trevor Project that said, I
Mm.
could be wrong. They said if there's one affirming adult, it reduces suicidality exponentially. So I look at Mill Pride as a place where, if I was looking back at my life, I try to be that person that I wish I had whenever I was a kid, and trying to make sure that we set up the best program we can and do whatever we can to make sure that children are seen and heard just like everyone else.
That same notion applies to the military spouse, which our entire conversation is focused on an ever changing view of what the military family is, what the components of that military family are, and how best to provide those support channels. When it comes to military spouses, one thing that I really enjoy that MMAA is doing is providing an educational scholarship. There is the 2022 MMAA Military Spouse Donna Johnson Memorial Scholarship. So I'm handing it over to you to give a description about the scholarship and what was the initial motivation behind creating it.
So we're really fortunate to have a company called Parsons Corporation that generously does a scholarship for us. So Donna Johnson was an employee of Parsons, but she was also a member of the armed forces. She was deployed, and unfortunately, she was killed in action. But what most people don't know about her is that she was married she was married, but it was not federally recognized. So whenever she was
Mm,
killed in action, the person that had to identify her body was her mother, and there was no authority for her wife to even claim anything. They
wow.
wouldn't let her have, the benefits of being a military spouse, even though it was a state right at the time. So that's kind of like the precipice of, I mean, it was a legal fight for her spouse. It was really, really difficult of not being really seen as a spouse for the time. And since then, I mean, we're still in contact with the family, and we make sure to honor her legacy because it's so important to know that, you know, there was struggles, but her legacy still lives on, and it's a great story, and an unfortunate event, of course, of perseverance and setting the path for hopefully the change. And in 2022, I can say that there's still gaps in benefits for survivors for LGBTQ families. It's actually codified that it's only heterosexual families that receive the benefits,
After
unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I was going to mention after 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, we can see how important issues like next of kin, being able to make those medical decisions for your partner, for your relatives, is so important to have all that paperwork in line to be able to have that access. Otherwise, you're left with these tragic situations in which families are not able to see their loved ones in times of need. They're not able to be there to be an advocate to make those medical decisions. So it is imperative for us to understand the weight that this very legal fight carries and how it uh, reverberates through so much of our day-to-day lives without us even acknowledging it. But on the ground, you're providing direct support in ways of your chapter network. I'd like to open the floor for you to give an understanding of the eligibility to join one of the chapter networks, where they're at, and how best to reach out to you and get connected.
So we have about 85 different chapters across the country and overseas in locations. They're all located on Facebook. So those communities are within searching. So if you ever want to find one, you can search on Facebook MMAA in the location. So one of them that's really popular is the National Capital Region, like the DC area. So you just put MMAA National Capital Region, and we just ask that you be an ally, or if you're a service member or a veteran, you can join those. I mean, we're all about sharing information, and some history about that is before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or during a Don't Ask, Don't Tell, they all used to be secret groups, and you had to have like special approval. And but since I joined as executive director, I've made those publicly accessible because I want to make sure that if we have allies in there, that's totally fine too. We're stronger together, and we just ask that you just be respectful and kind, and we work together for the common mission of supporting the LGBTQ military and veteran community. And we're also in the process of updating our website, so all of those chapters will be listed very soon, hopefully later this month in June. Um, but I mean, there's really no qualification. We just want those folks that are interested to join. And in a non-COVID year, which is hopefully coming up soon, we usually have events in different areas, and we will have our national gala in DC on September the 8th, 2022, at the Army Navy Country Club. So that's one of the events that we come together, all the chapters come together just for one night to celebrate, our community.
Just a little bit of time has passed since the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's only been about 10, 12 years. One thing that I want to acknowledge is something that you brought up about these Facebook groups, because I served during Don't Ask, Don't Tell as a closeted gay male. And I remember being a part of many of these secret Facebook groups in which they were geographically located on military bases for us as LGBTQ individuals to know where resources were at, to understand where you can get community, where you can get support, where safe places were at for you to go grocery shopping, all those things that some didn't take into account. But we knew that there were many locations that were not safe for us to go. And having that information readily available, having someone there to talk to, was one of the main things that got me through. So I appreciate these networks still being alive and available for future generations of LGBTQ service members, veterans, and allies. The information to families is what I want to focus on for this specific segment, because I want to present a few scenarios to you and pass the microphone over to you to talk on them, because there's a lot under the LGBTQ umbrella. Because the first topic I'd like you to discuss is LGBTQ service members that have families. How do we best support them? What are some of the obstacles that they're dealing with on active duty? And what are some of the issues that they're dealing with as veterans?
So one of the biggest things is, there are still, I believe, at least over 10 states that you can be discriminated against for simply just being LGBTQ. I know for a fact that like Texas is one, Arizona, where you can literally be fired from a job. And not only do military families already face challenges, especially spouses, when it comes to employment and or underemployment, even food insecurities for folks, mental health access, resources. But when you look at the LGBTQ community as a whole, I mean, we have even higher disparities. And then if you layer that on top of another, I mean, there's so many. For me, especially, I'm going to get this is personal to me, but I lead this organization and I'm a veteran, and I do this every day. But we tried to get my son enrolled at a private school in my area that I live, and they denied him just because we were LGBTQ. So these are still challenges that we face as veterans, and just blatant discrimination that exists for LGBTQ families. And then for active duty service members or even Guard or Reserve, if you live in a location I mean, this transcends also if you have children that are LGBTQ, but if you live in locations that have these, discriminatory bills that are being passed, like, how are you protecting your families? Not only are you going to work trying to protect the country, but then you have to go home and try to just protect your families, and there's no protections. The Equality Act hasn't been passed. Sexual orientation and gender identity are not always protected. So even just living daily uh, is incredibly difficult, and for as LGBTQ folks in general, um, I think for the common misconception is that we want special treatment. No, actually, we just want to be treated like everyone else and just have the same rights and you know we just want the same rights, really. I don't want anything special. I just want my child to have a good education. We just want to not be discriminated against. We want to be able to just live life like as it is. And so I think, you know, for LGBTQ families, especially that are serving. One of the things that crosses over from military service to the veteran community, if you're going to, if you want to do family building, it's really difficult in the DoD to have resources to, have a family. And then if you go to the VA side, even if you're diagnosed with infertility, you have the law states that you have to be in a heterosexual marriage and you have to be able to produce sperm and eggs to produce families. So just having those, it's really difficult to have, we don't, even if you can access those services, you have other challenges that you have to get over.
I,
Um,
I've said in multiple episodes prior to this one that the devil's in the details when it comes to many of the programs that are quote unquote available and meant to help and support, but the bureaucracy, the qualifications and eligibility sometimes are, what counteracts the spirit of the very program or law that is meant to support that community. So that very notion you just brought up, applies to families of service members and veterans that have LGBTQ youth. They may be in areas in which they can't provide those services and protections to their children because of the state that they're assigned to by orders from the active duty side, or whether they reside there as a veteran or National Guard reservist. These are all issues that are kitchen table issues for those LGBTQ families. And it is for us to figure out the best ways to not only support those LGBTQ individuals solo, but also their families. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to describe to the listening audience how they can connect with MMAA, how the local community can also support, how others can get involved and provide that partnership and become that ally to the community.
So I think like the biggest thing is, well, as a nonprofit organization, we always want the support of donors. I mean, that's the biggest thing at bread and butter, because we have a big mission to do. Um, but for I like to look at it in like three increments. What can you do, like on the large level, the medium level, and the bottom level? How to get involved. And um, first, I'm going to say you can always email us at info@modernmilitary.org. We're more than happy to help with whatever you have. But what I always talk about in a lot of my speaking is, the first thing that you can do is to be an ally is get educated, um,
Mm.
ask questions, just learn the history, uh, and just be open and vulnerable to what you do know and what you don't know. Which is, sometimes you're going to have to apologize, for asking these questions, maybe, but just know like we're all in this learning process. Things change so quickly, and that's okay. Just being like authentic and open. But I say even start like small, like become a member of your HOA, become involved, become a like if you have a seat at tables, make room for other perspectives. From like at my HOA, like here's a simple example: is they sent out this thing for a poll pass, and it had mother and father on it, and I wrote them back and said, we're two moms, and so this form isn't really inclusive to us. Is there any way you can change it? Simple things, or it could just be parent one or parent two, or be involved with your school, or at a medium level, if you're working at a corporation, make sure you like think about your peers, think about like what healthcare they may be missing, what your corporation, who they're donating to, because you may have a cause for that. And then on a larger level, like talk to your congressional folks. I mean, call them, email them, tell them, pass the Equality Act, pass, you know, especially for Texas, don't, target children. Don't target children in Florida. There's a lot of things, but probably the easiest thing for anybody to do, I call it wallet activism. And
Mm.
because you vote every day with your money. You spend your money in different places, and make sure that your money is going to places that support causes that you care about. And you can look at opensecrets.org, and they have corporations and who they support. Make sure that your dollar is going to people and places that you care about. There's a restaurant that I really love. It's got great lemonade, waffle fries, but unfortunately they support anti-LGBTQ
Yeah.
bills. So I choose to not go there. Maybe my $7 doesn't matter, but it matters to me. And if it's a case of, if it's not LGBTQ rights, make sure you're doing whatever thing you care about and you're using your money for the good.
One thing that people can do is also check out the Modern Military Magazine, which is spectacular for a multitude of reasons. It provides a lot of good information for families, a lot of good information for service members, and just some very beautiful pride profiles. We have a month in the year set aside for pride in June, but setting that aside, what I'd like to do is use our last segment, which is double time, to give an opportunity for you to highlight some of those pride profiles that you've presented and give us an idea, 60 seconds or less, give us an idea of these beautiful individuals and why you chose them as the subject for your pride profile. So the first one I'm going to go is Shakira Monet.
I mean, I think like all I'm gonna just overarch all of them. All of them
Mm,
come from a different aspects, from either being service members themselves, veterans, service providers,
mm,
parents. All of these profiles highlight the significant you know obstacles and challenges, and also wins and not wins, of what it looks like to be connected to the military and veteran communities. And I think we started with Shakira. We have Billy Richardson, Xander, Sam Rodriguez, and Amanda Brewer. Like they're all,
yeah,
even though we highlighted them and they may be connected, it's interesting how like their identity is centered around some sort of pride that comes with being
absolutely.
military connected. And like you said, there is one month, June is Pride Month, but we want to make sure that it's celebrated 365, because Pride doesn't stop at the end of June. And it doesn't stop whenever people take off the Pride logos off their corporations. But we will continue to highlight these people because, for me, highlighting the average person is just as important as highlighting those figureheads, because you can make a difference anywhere you're at, from being a parent to serving to being a service provider, a caregiver. They're all so critically important, and they lay the groundwork, for this legacy that we're building upon. That the struggle for LGBTQ inclusion hasn't happened overnight, and there's still much work to be done. And if we can highlight those stories and those great challenges and obstacles and overcoming, then we're better, we're stronger, and we can fight even longer.
Each one of the profiles that you had mentioned, Shakira and Billy, like they are so unique in their approach to these obstacles that they faced as LGBTQ individuals, supporters, parents. That was the beauty when I was looking through and seeing the different shades that service comes in, the different shades that partnership and allyship come in. But at the core, it was uniting as one to ask, how can we support and how can I let you know that I'm proud of you? And each one of those uh, pride profiles that you've presented in the Modern Military Magazine is astounding. And I behoove each and every single one of our listeners to check out the magazine and seek out these wonderful representations of service, parents that are like going above and beyond to support and love their kids, but a idea into the wide breadth that the LGBTQ community is providing service to our country. We serve at higher rates than our civilian counterparts, and it's something that we've always looked at as a mission of ours to fight for a better tomorrow. So you have put up that fight yourself in the Air Force, and you continue to do that now as CEO of Modern Military Association of America. Jennifer, thank you for joining us on this leg of our journey. There are many families that are transitioning out of the armed forces and into the corporate workforce that are thanking you at this very moment for everything that you've done prior to this conversation, and are grateful for the work that you're going to continue to do after we let you go today, because I know you're extremely busy, and I just want to thank you one last time before I let you go. It has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Compass Check with AmeriVet Securities. I've been your host, James Fitzgerald. See you next time.